Hi, so I'm going to be talking about commonly confused words in the English language and how to remember to distinguish them. English is hard. So there are a lot of easily confused words, and a number of them we'll be going over is it's, where and were, effect and effect, further, farther, except, lose, loose, whose, and whose. So it's versus is. It's without an apostrophe is a possessive term. Look at that dog. Its fur is all matted. It's is a contraction for it is. Look at that dog. It's adorable. So one way to just remember it is if you put it is instead of it's. So if you say, look at that dog playing with its toy, then it's clear that that's not the right word to use. You want to use the one that is its, not it apostrophe s. Where versus were. Where is a question word about a place. Where is Nate? Where is the past tense of being? You were funny tonight. So one way to remember it is that there and where rhyme, and they're about place. And you remember that there has an H in it, and so does where. So that's how you remember the difference between where and were. Effect versus affect. Effect is almost always a noun. The effect of this presentation is learning. Affect is always a verb. Drinking alcohol affects people's ability to drive. So you can remember the difference between affect and effect because effect is an end result, and effect and end both have e's. Further versus farther. Farther is a word that has to do with physical distance. How much farther away is Smith Hall than CLA? Further has to do with metaphorical distance. So like time. Before we go any further, are there any more questions? So one way to remember it is that area is a word that has to do with physical measurement, physical distance, that kind of stuff. And that starts with an A, and farther has an A in it. Another thing to remember is that further and future are both words that have to do with metaphorical distance, and both start with FU. Accept versus accept. Accept is a verb that means to receive. I accept your praise. Accept is a word that means to exclude. I like everyone here except Drew. So you would use X. So you would accept an award. Both start with A. So that's one way to remember it. And also accept means to exclude, and both start with EX. Lose versus loose. Lose is a word that indicates loss of something. I would hate to lose credit for this. Loose is a term that means something is not fixed in place. My son's tooth is loose. So one way to remember that is that lose and loss both start with LOS, whereas loose starts with LOO. So if the sentence doesn't have to do with loss, then the word loose is the appropriate word to use. Whose versus whose. Whose is a contraction for who is. Who's ready for this presentation to be over? Whose is a question for possession. Whose presentation could possibly be better than this? This is hard because they're homonyms and they're both question words. But remembering that whose, WHO apostrophe S, is a contraction of who is, and whose, WHOSE, is not. So if you're not sure, just use who is and see if it makes any sense. Who is sweater is this doesn't make any sense, so it wouldn't be the WHO apostrophe S, and so the word to be used in this circumstance would be WHOSE. Hope that helped.